Lily Hutchinson never stopped believing her father was hiding something, but not what everyone thought. When Alan Hutchinson confessed to killing his wife Clara, the quiet town of Millbrook accepted the tragedy without question. But as Lily uncovered the secrets Clara left behind, sketchbooks filled with fear, warnings ignored, and a stalker who vanished without a trace, she began to suspect the truth was far darker than murder. What if Alan didn't kill Clara to silence her, but to protect her? In the quiet suburb of Millbrook, Illinois, life moved at a gentle pace. It was the kind of place where neighbors waved from their driveways, children rode bikes until dusk, and families gathered for Sunday barbecues. Among the neat lawns and tree-lined streets stood the Hutchinson home, a white two-story house with green shutters and rose bushes that Clara Hutchinson tended to with great care. To anyone passing by, it looked like the picture of happiness. Alan Hutchinson was well known in the community. He worked as a senior insurance broker at a local firm and often gave talks at community meetings about planning for the future. Tall, well-dressed, and always polite, he seemed like the kind of man who had it all under control. His wife, Clara, was equally admired. As an art teacher at Millbrook High School, she was known for encouraging even the most disinterested students to pick up a brush. Her classroom was filled with color, laughter, and the smell of turpentine and fresh paint. Together, they were the couple everyone looked up to. Their only daughter, Lily, was in her final year of high school. 17 and ambitious, she dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. She volunteered at the local animal shelter, played piano on weekends, and was top of her class. Many saw the Hutchinson family as the embodiment of suburban success, stable, loving, and quietly prosperous. But behind closed doors, the perfect image was beginning to crack. Alan had been growing distant. He often came home late from work, sometimes skipping dinner entirely. Clara seemed more withdrawn. Her once vibrant energy now faded into distracted stares and quiet sighs. Neighbors occasionally heard raised voices at night, though they dismissed it as ordinary marital tension. No one suspected anything serious. Still, there were signs that something was off. Clara stopped attending her weekly book club, citing migraines. She no longer smiled as brightly during parent-teacher meetings. Some of her students whispered that she seemed sad, even scared at times. Lily, ever observant, noticed the tension too. She stopped inviting friends over and began spending more time in her room or at the animal shelter. But she never said anything. Not to her friends, not to her teachers. Like many teenagers, she hoped that if she stayed quiet, things would go back to normal. Then, one Thursday morning in early spring, everything changed. It had rained heavily the night before. The streets were still wet, the air thick with the smell of damp earth and budding trees. Clara didn't show up to work that morning. Her coworkers called her phone, but there was no answer. She had never missed a day without notice in over 10 years of teaching. Concerned, the school contacted Alan, who claimed he hadn't seen her that morning either. He sounded calm, almost too calm. Later that afternoon, a wellness check was requested. Police arrived at the Hutchinson home around 2:15 p.m. The front door was unlocked. The house was silent. In the kitchen, they found Clara. She was lying on the tiled floor, a pool of blood around her head, her eyes open and lifeless. There was no sign of a break-in, no overturned furniture, nothing stolen. Just one clear fact: Clara Hutchinson had been murdered in her own home. And Alan Hutchinson was the only one there. Alan Hutchinson was arrested that same evening, just hours after Clara's body was discovered. Police officers found him in the den, sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the television. He didn't run. He didn't protest. He simply stood up, placed his hands behind his back, and let the officers lead him away. To the outside world, it was a confession without words. The man who had once seemed so composed was now at the center of a tragedy that would shake Millbrook to its core. At the police station, the questioning began. Detectives expected denial, confusion, or maybe even anger. But Alan surprised them. He admitted everything. He said the night before, he and Clara had argued. He claimed it had started with a simple disagreement about Lily's college plans. Voices were raised, tempers flared. Then, according to Alan, Clara said something that pushed him over the edge. In a moment of rage, he grabbed a heavy glass paperweight from the kitchen counter and struck her. He said it wasn't premeditated. He said he didn't mean to kill her. It just happened. He told them. He had panicked. He didn't call for help. Instead, he sat with her body for hours, unable to move. When morning came, He got dressed for work, fed the dog, and left the house pretending everything was normal. The confession was enough to charge him with second-degree murder. The news spread quickly. Millbrook's favorite family was now shattered beyond repair. The community's trust in Alan vanished overnight. His co-workers were stunned. Former clients withdrew their business. Friends stopped calling. Even those who had once praised his generosity now spoke of him in hushed, angry tones. But amid the outrage and sorrow, there was one voice that refused to condemn him: Lily's. People assumed she would cut ties, move in with relatives, and try to forget. Instead, she shocked everyone. At the first court appearance, Lily sat quietly in the front row of the courtroom, her hands folded in her lap. She made eye contact with her father as he entered in handcuffs, and she didn't look away. When the judge read the charges, she didn't flinch. In interviews, Lily never claimed her father was innocent, but she never called him a murderer either. She said she didn't believe the story was as simple as it seemed. She believed he was holding something back, something important. She didn't know what it was, but she was certain it had to do with her mother, and maybe with her. Her stance was met with confusion and even anger. People accused her of being manipulated. Others said she was just traumatized. But Lily remained calm, consistent, and quiet in her belief. She visited Alan in jail every week, bringing books, photos, and small notes. She spoke to him through the thick glass and left with the same unreadable expression she always wore. When Alan finally stood before the judge to enter his plea, the courtroom fell silent. He pled guilty. No trial, no defense, no attempt to reduce the sentence. Just a simple admission. He had killed Clara Hutchinson. He was sentenced to 22 years in prison. As he was led away, Lily stood. She walked over to the aisle, placed her hand briefly on the wooden barrier separating her from her father, and watched him disappear through the side door. The entire room was quiet. No one knew what to make of it. Lily did not cry. She just stood still, eyes fixed, waiting for something that hadn't yet come. After the sentencing, Lily moved in with her mother's sister, Aunt Diane, who lived on the edge of town. The transition was quiet. There were no reporters outside the house, no cameras flashing. People had lost interest once Alan's confession ended the mystery. As far as the world was concerned, the story was over. A man had killed his wife. He admitted it. He went to prison. Case closed. But not for Lily. She couldn't stop thinking about her father's face in the courtroom, calm, emotionless, almost rehearsed. Something about his confession felt too clean, too quick. He had always been a methodical man, never impulsive. The idea that he had simply snapped didn't make sense to her. She started revisiting memories, piecing things together, trying to find what everyone else had missed. One rainy afternoon, while unpacking boxes from her old home, she came across something unexpected. Tucked beneath a pile of old school books was one of her mother's sketchbooks. Clara had dozens of them, filled with watercolors, charcoal drawings, and personal reflections. Most had been packed away or donated to the school, but this one was different. It had been hidden. The cover was worn and stained. Lily almost overlooked it. When she opened it, she expected to see the usual mix of portraits and landscapes. But what she found was far more personal. Page after page was filled with frantic charcoal drawings, faces without eyes, doors left ajar, dark hallways stretching into shadows. The artwork was haunting. Unlike Claire's usual graceful style, these images were rushed, sharp, and filled with fear. Nestled between the drawings were handwritten notes. At first, they seemed like captions, but as Lily read further, she realized they were journal entries, private thoughts her mother had never shared aloud. The entries began innocently enough. Clara wrote about sleepless nights and feeling watched. She mentioned hearing strange noises outside the house, cars parked too long across the street. She even described receiving calls where no one spoke. At first, she chalked it up to paranoia or stress from work, but over time, her fear grew. One note stood out. I feel like I'm being hunted. I don't know by who. Ellen says I'm imagining things, but something's not right. I feel it in my bones. Lily read that line over and over again. Her mother hadn't trusted her own instincts. She had tried to protect Lily from whatever fear haunted her, but she had kept it all hidden. Toward the end of the sketchbook, the entries became more fragmented. Clara's handwriting became shaky. She stopped drawing altogether and began scribbling notes in the margins. She wrote about being followed after work, about someone standing at the edge of the woods near the school parking lot. She even mentioned filing a report at one point, but there was no record of it. Then came the final entry. I don't know who to trust anymore, not even Alan. But I have to protect Lily, no matter what. Lily closed the sketchbook with trembling hands. Her heart raced. If her mother had been afraid of someone and possibly even her own husband, then nothing about her father's confession made sense. Either Alan had lied about why he killed Clara, or he hadn't done it at all. The sketchbook didn't answer everything, but it opened a door Lily hadn't known existed, and she was determined to walk through it. Lily couldn't ignore what she had read in her mother's sketchbook. The fear Clara described felt too real, too detailed to be imagined. The idea that Alan had acted in a fit of rage seemed less and less believable the more Lily thought about it. Something was missing, something big, and she needed to find it, no matter how painful it might be. Her search began with the people closest to her mother. She reached out to Clara's co-workers at the high school, posing her questions carefully, not wanting to sound paranoid. Most of them were reluctant to say much. They spoke fondly of Clara, described her as warm and caring, but brushed aside any idea that she might have been afraid or watched. But one name kept coming up, a former teacher named George Brantley. George had taught physical education and left the school suddenly, just a few months before Clara's death. Lily didn't remember him well, but something about the way people avoided talking about him made her uneasy. When she asked why he had left, she got vague answers. He didn't fit in, one teacher said. Another mentioned that he'd had issues. No one said anything concrete. Lily searched old yearbooks and school staff directories. George had been listed on the faculty for only 2 years. Then he was gone. She dug deeper. News archives revealed that George had once been accused of inappropriate behavior toward a student, but the case had quietly disappeared. No charges were filed. Clara had been on the faculty at the time. The puzzle pieces clicked into place when Lily found an old email address in her mother's computer files. It was an official message Clara had written but never sent, addressed to the school board. In it, she detailed concerns about George's behavior. She mentioned finding him loitering near the student parking lot after hours. She even described a disturbing encounter in the teacher's lounge, where he had tried to intimidate her after she confronted him. The email ended with a plea. Please take this seriously. I believe George Brantley is a danger to our students and possibly to me. Chills ran through Lily as she read the words. Her mother had tried to warn someone, but it appeared no one had listened. Fueled by anger and determination, Lily tracked George down. It took weeks of searching online records and forums, but she eventually found a lead. A man using George's middle name, Calvin, had recently rented a trailer in southern Indiana. The photo attached to the ID was old, but the eyes were unmistakable. Lily hired a private investigator to confirm the match. The PI returned with more than she expected. George had been living off the grid, no stable job, using aliases, and moving frequently. More disturbing, he had a record of past complaints, most of them from women who said he followed or harassed them. In one case, police found a collection of photos in his home. Some of them were of Clara, taken from a distance. That discovery changed everything. It wasn't just fear or paranoia. Clara had been right. She was being watched. Someone had been stalking her. If Alan had discovered this, it might explain everything. Maybe he confronted George. Maybe something happened between them that night. Maybe the truth had been buried in silence and guilt. The problem was, George had vanished again. No address, no phone, no trace. But now Lily wasn't chasing shadows. She had a name, a history, and a reason to believe her father's story wasn't what it seemed. And she was no longer alone in the search for answers. 3 years after Alan Hutchinson was sent to prison, the story that Millbrook had tried to forget quietly reemerged. A letter arrived at the prosecutor's office from a cold case unit working in a different state. They had arrested a man for assault in Kentucky. His name was George Brantley. During the routine processing of his personal items, officers discovered something unsettling: a worn photograph of Clara Hutchinson folded into his wallet. On the back, in faded ink, were the words she knew. When the cold case detectives cross-referenced his identity, they discovered his past employment history, including his time at Millbrook High. They contacted Illinois authorities immediately. Though George had not confessed to anything related to Clara's death, his possession of her photograph, along with other suspicious behavior, raised new questions. Old reports from Clara's co-workers and Lily's private investigation findings suddenly became crucial evidence. Lily was notified shortly after. The prosecutor called her in for a meeting and laid out the facts. George was now a person of interest in Clara's death. There was enough to reopen the case. But since Alan had already pled guilty, the situation was complicated. Overturning a confession and sentencing wasn't simple. Legally, Alan had admitted to the crime. Reversing that would take more than suspicion. It would require hard evidence that someone else was directly involved. Lily visited her father that weekend, holding a folder filled with documents, copies of the sketchbook entries, the unsent email, the PI's report, and the latest arrest information. She watched his face carefully as she explained everything. Alan didn't cry. He didn't shout. He only closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Then he told Lily something she had never heard before. The night Clara died, Alan had come home late. He found her in the kitchen, shaken and crying. She had just seen George parked outside again. She begged Alan to believe her. That night, they argued not about college, but about fear and protection. Alan had wanted to call the police. Clara insisted it would only make things worse. She was terrified. What happened next? Alan couldn't say with certainty. He remembered hearing a sound outside, grabbing a flashlight, and stepping into the backyard. He thought George had left, but when he came back in, Clara was on the floor. At first, he believed George had attacked her, but he couldn't prove it, and George was gone. Alan knew the police wouldn't believe a man chasing shadows. He also knew Clara's complaints had never been taken seriously. So he made a decision. He took the blame. He told the police they had fought, that he had struck her. It was the only explanation that would keep Lily out of the public eye and the media frenzy. He would serve time, protect what was left of his daughter's life, and carry the weight of the lie. Now, with the new evidence, the state agreed to re-examine the case. George's connection to Clara, along with Alan's revised statement, led to a new investigation. While Alan's conviction was not overturned immediately, the court acknowledged the strong possibility that a mistake had been made. George was held for questioning in Kentucky on unrelated charges, but authorities in Illinois requested his extradition to continue the inquiry. Lily returned home and placed her mother's final sketch found tucked inside the last page of the notebook into a frame. It showed a young girl standing between two tall shadows. One shadow had sharp, jagged edges. The other was calm, protective. Beneath it, her mother had written, "Whatever happens, protect her." In the end, Alan had done exactly that. He had protected Lily with silence, and Lily, in turn, had protected him with truth. The story wasn't over, but it was no longer buried.